We got a mailbag video coming your way on today's show, but in case I didn't get to your question, you can use this time as an opportunity to go down to the comment section, ask your question down there using hashtag Broncos, and I'll respond to your question down below after the video is over. So without further ado, let's get into today's show. It is mailbag time here on the Broncos Breakdown. I answer your questions you guys asked in a community post I put out earlier this week. So in case you're watching this video for the first time or watching our channel for the first time, well, if you ever want to get on a future show, you just got to subscribe, comment your question on the community post. We usually do them in the middle of the week leading into the weekend, and that way you can get yourself on a future show. Let's get into our first question, though. All Out Broncos 1858. Appreciate a loyal subscriber right there asking, should the Broncos re-sign Teddy to a one-year deal if we are not able to trade for a quarterback like Rodgers and Wilson? No, God, no. Please, no. I don't think I can express enough how I really would not like to run it back and just experiment it all over again and think we're going to get a different result with the same quarterback and almost the same roster minus a couple two guys on defense. And I mean, the offense is going to look the same pretty much besides Melvin Gordon and a new right tackle. So I understand the question of, hey, if we can't get our top guys here, is Teddy Bridgewater the next best option? It's not that Teddy's a bad quarterback, but if we just run it back the same way we did last year, why should we expect the coaching staff to be the biggest thing that's the difference between a 7-win team in 2021 and a potential 12-win team? I don't think Hackett's crew is going to make up for 5 wins. So I would not run it back. I would look to a different option. Maybe it's worse, but I would at least try something else. All right, Mick Walsh asked the next question, asking, if the Rodgers trade falls through, will Peyton go for either Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson? It's a good question, Mick, and it's one that I'm very curious about. If Plan A is Aaron Rodgers, which it's all signs pointing to that, what's Plan B? I think Russell Wilson has to be your number one target if you cannot get Aaron Rodgers. Now, I don't know how affordable or how attainable Russell Wilson is. The Seahawks don't want to move on from him, so all the chips really belong to Russell Wilson, and he said that he doesn't want to trade, but yeah, he also has a no-trade clause, so if he really didn't want to trade, he could just refuse all trade rumors, but he doesn't quite do that. If you compare Russell Wilson to Kirk Cousins, I bet you'd be surprised. These are their stats over the last 2 seasons, and I bet you didn't think Kirk Cousins would be the guy with more touchdowns and almost the same amount of interceptions and nearly over 1,000 more passing yards for a very minimal decline in completion percentage. I just think if we had a blind quarterback test up, not many people would pick Kirk Cousins to be on the right. With that all being said, Russ is still my number one guy. However, what do you guys think? If Denver can't get Rodgers, who is your next guy? Mine's Russell Wilson. In fact, I'd rather have Russell Wilson than Aaron Rodgers. But Rodgers, it looks like he's more on the trade market than Russell Wilson is. Let me know what you're thinking down below. Next question coming in from Binks Nagal. What position do you think the Broncos are going to draft at 9th pick? Well, Binks, appreciate the question. It's a good question, but a tough one to answer because I can't definitively say the Broncos will have the 9th overall pick. But if they do have the 9th overall pick because they didn't trade it for Rodgers or Wilson or Deshaun Watson, these are the biggest needs. Quarterback's number 1. And then you go to tackle, right tackle spot. Bobby Massey's not returning, and Anderson and Fleming aren't the answer either. Then you look at edge, trying to replace Von Miller, and Malik Reed hits free agency as well. Linebacker, just because you lost Josie Jewell and A.J. Johnson during the middle of the season, so you're going to try to fill those voids. And then guard, I don't know how much I like Glasgow or Reisner. I think they're good guys. I'd get beers with them. They could outdrink me most likely, but I just don't think that guard is the biggest need for this team right now. The big point I want to make, though, is we'll even see if we have a number 9 overall pick. I'm looking at your question of who do you think the Broncos could draft at number 9? What position do you think they could draft? I think it'll be quarterback because if they have the 9th overall pick, then they probably didn't trade for the quarterback they wanted because that quarterback would have cost them their first overall pick. So I would lean towards quarterback if that happens. So if it's not QB, we'll go with maybe edge. Maybe Denver gets Garoppolo or Cousins, and they don't have to give up their first-round pick. If that's the case, then I bet they go with one of those big edge guys. This is a loaded draft class for that defensive end spot, those playmakers and game changers, really. Now, you've heard me kind of ramble on for a little bit, but who do you want the Broncos to draft? I want you to put the GM hat on. Let me know what you're thinking. I like the idea of getting an edge player, but I also love the idea of not having the number 9 overall pick because it belongs to the Seattle Seahawks, and we have Russell Wilson. Because let me tell you this, no one is as good as Russell Wilson at that number 9 spot in this draft class. Speaking of drafts, if you love mock drafts, then this is the channel for you. We're always putting out mock drafts here. We're always talking about the draft. I, for one, am addicted to finding more and more mock drafts. I also just love seeing different ideas and different routes teams could go. So if you want free mock drafts, subscribe today. Hit that big red button. Super simple. It's red right now. You click it, it becomes gray, and you're locked in for free content all off-season long. Next question comes in from a tough one to pronounce. We'll go as Xavier Solaro. I think I got that maybe. Is the Aaron Rodgers trade still going on? That's a good question. If I had Rodgers on speed dial, I'd call and ask. And he says that a decision is coming soon. So as we film this right now, I don't have that decision in my hands. But I'm thinking it's going to be the middle to late next week before he gives us an inclination of what he's feeling in terms of staying in Green Bay, retiring, or testing the trade market. Next question comes in from Dan. Who do you think the Broncos would have to give up to trade for Rodgers and Adams? So kind of combining now these last two questions, talking about Rodgers. This time we add Davante Adams. So if you wanted a trade for Aaron Rodgers, and then the Davante Adams would look like a tag-in trade because he's a free agent, so the Packers can't just trade him away. But if they franchise tag him, then they could trade him. So that's how that would have to work. Here's what I think a trade could look like for those two guys. I have the Packers getting the Broncos' first and second round pick in 2022 and in 2023. So that's 2 firsts, 2 seconds in the next 2 drafts. Then they get a second round pick in the 2024 draft. So Denver's next 3 second round picks and their next 2 firsts. Yeah, get that all down. And then Jerry Jeudy. And I think if you toss in Jeudy, you can save yourself a first round pick. I don't like the idea of trading away Jeudy. But I do like the idea of acquiring these two guys, Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams. And because you're giving away Jeudy and all that draft capital, I bet Peyton is a good guy on the phone, and he can sweet talk Green Bay into giving them a 2023 day 3 pick, like the 5th round. So that's what I think it would look like. But what do you guys think? Would you do this trade? If you would, type A for accept. If you do not like the idea of giving up all of those assets, all those picks, including Jerry Jeudy, then type D for decline. We'll get to the rest of the questions in just a moment, but I want to tell you about this great deal going on at chatsports.com/Broncos hoodie. It's still cold out there, and we know we're still hitting the slopes up at Mile High. So if you want to do it in style, wearing some fresh Broncos gear, thanks to our friends at Fanatics, go head on over to chatsports.com/Broncos hoodie. I got that link in the comments and the description of today's video. Alex Riviera asking the next question. Appreciate the question, Alex. What could the Broncos potentially get from a Drew Lock trade? That's a good question. I think if you were to trade Drew Lock, former second-round pick, his value is probably a 4th-round pick, right? I think that sounds about right for Drew Lock. I don't think you're going to get a second or a third, but I don't think he's as bad as a 5th. And I think if you saw Sam Darnold went to the Panthers for a second-round pick, so he's not as perceived, we'll say, as good as Darnold, because Darnold was a top pick in the draft a couple of years ago. I think a 4th rounder sounds about right for Drew Lock. Maybe it's too generous, honestly. Maybe it's a 5th. I don't know how well other GMs are in on getting for a guy who got benched in his 3rd year for a veteran in Teddy Bridgewater. All right, let's move on to the next question coming in from Joey Baca. Joey asks, should the Broncos get a top 10 wide receiver? Not saying we don't have talent, but get a scary receiver like Adams or Hill, maybe OBJ. That's a good idea if we're playing Madden, but you're right. We've got plenty of talent at wide receiver. When you look at the fact that you already have Cortland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy, and you have KJ Hamler coming off IR, you have an overflow of talent at that spot. And so I don't know how much you really need those guys right there, but if you like playing Madden, I forgot about Tim Patrick too, then yeah, I guess you could try and make that trade. In fact, producer Trace right now working on the fly here trying to get the depth chart up. We can get that? Yeah, so let's get the depth chart here. There you go. So you guys can see what it looks like. Cortland Sutton, Jeudy, and Patrick. So I think if you wanted to go and get one of those top guys like Adams, you probably have to give up Jerry Jeudy or Tim Patrick or even Cortland Sutton. But I think the Broncos have much bigger needs right now to settle before they look to even add to the wide receiver room, like getting Odell Beckham Jr., who's coming off an ACL tear, mind you, as well. So I would not think that's high on Peyton's priority list. That's going to do it for us here on today's show. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we will catch you guys later here on the Broncos Breakdown.